Hello, how are you all? With lockdown extended and continued isolation for most of us, it's a bit of a strange time, isn't it? So much of what we're used to has changed over the past few weeks. I don't know about you, but I'm finding this time to be a bit of a roller coaster. I can experience a whole range of emotions, even in an hour, let alone over a day or a week. In our house, we've taken to using emojis to check in with one another about how we're feeling. We did decide the other day that now would be a very good time to introduce a version of the poo emoji that doesn't look quite so happy. Jesus's disciples knew a fair bit about emotional roller coasters themselves. I can't believe it's only a fortnight ago that we were joining together online celebrating Palm Sunday. The disciples travelled into Jerusalem alongside Jesus as the crowds were cheering him. They experienced that emotional high, that time of celebration. And then within a few days, one of the group was literally selling out on Jesus. Another denied knowing him. Most of the others ran away and abandoned him. And those cheering crowds continued shouting, but this time for Jesus to be killed. Then Jesus died on the cross, and the inevitable grief followed. Then a few days later, Peter and John discovered that Jesus' body is no longer in the tomb. Finally, Mary comes and tells them that Jesus is alive again and has sent her to tell them. They have shut themselves away, fearful that they too will be killed for having been Jesus' friends. It's not surprising that they're feeling rather confused by what is going on. This year, more than previously, I understand a bit more how disorientated they must have felt. Into that disorientation, into their isolation, into their fear, appears Jesus. And the words he speaks to them are the ones they most need to hear. Peace be with you. Shalom. A peace that runs deep to the core of who they are, to the core of who we are. A peace that can only come from God and from knowing God. A peace that they could experience because they could see and know that Jesus not only had died so that people could be put right with God, but that he had also been raised from the dead, showing that he had also ultimately beaten the powers of evil and death. Thomas wasn't there with them, and he didn't believe them when they told him about it. You can kind of understand why, I guess. It's not what usually happens, is it? So what does Jesus do? He goes back a week later, just for Thomas's benefit. Again, he says, peace be with you. And in that experience of meeting the risen Jesus, Thomas recognises Jesus for who he really is. My Lord and my God. Jesus wanted the disciples to believe he really was God's son, that he really had come back to life. He wanted them to have that deep, deep peace. He wanted them to have that life in all its fullness that he had promised. So he went and met with them where they were. He knew they were fearful. He knew they were confused. He knew they were full of doubts. So he went to them and offered them peace. And Jesus does the same for us today. Into our disorientation, into our isolation, into our fear, walks Jesus. Peace be with you. He meets us where we are, however we are feeling today. He knows that we're on an emotional roller coaster right now, and he comes to meet us wherever we are. If you're afraid, Jesus says, peace be with you. If you're grieving, Jesus says, peace be with you. If you're feeling relieved that you can stay at home right now, Jesus says, peace be with you. If you feel bad about how you're feeling right now, Jesus says, peace be with you. Mary had already told the disciples that Jesus was alive, but they still needed proof and a reminder from Jesus. Knowing Jesus and knowing that he is with us at this difficult time can bring us a deep peace that quite frankly doesn't make sense. But that's another example of how God does things differently, an example of his topsy-turvy, upside-down way of doing things. Knowing Jesus doesn't mean that we won't have wobbles, but they can be just that, wobbles. Jesus is here with us in these troubled times, and he can bring us peace. Some of you may have one of these, or maybe a palm cross, or maybe you could make one for yourself out of some paper. There are various instruction videos on Pinterest and YouTube. Make a cross, get yourself a cross and put it somewhere nearby. Hold it when you need to be reminded that Jesus is with you. Hold it when you need peace. I'll finish with the final words from our gospel reading today. These things about Jesus have been written so that you may come to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that through believing you may have life in his name. Amen. May God's peace be with you today and in the coming days and weeks. God bless you.